Welcome to this explainer. I want you to start by picturing a very quiet yet incredibly dramatic shift in the global geopolitical landscape. We're not talking about a bomb going off or some fiery speech. We're talking about a stack of paper landing on a desk with a dull thud. Today, we're diving into a single document published by Japan's Ministry of Defense. But this isn't just any document. It signals a massive structural shift in how one of the world's major economies views its closest neighbors. We are going to look closely at what it actually says, what happened out there in the physical world to prompt it, and how the other nations involved are responding.
So let's set the scene. August 4th, 2026. On this specific date, no ships moved, no missiles flew, but Japan's cabinet approved a book. It's their annual assessment of the world, titled Defense of Japan 2026, and it clocks in at a hefty 598 pages. Now, inside the short English digest of this massive document, there was something brand new. A dedicated section entirely focused on the military cooperation between China and Russia. We're not talking about a footnote here, not just a passing paragraph, an entire section of its own.
Section 1, the 2026 White Paper. Okay, let's dive right into what this document actually represents.
You really have to start by understanding what this object actually is, because the format matters immensely. A defense white paper is not journalism, right? It's not a hot take or casual analysis. It is a government describing, strictly on the record, how it understands its very own security situation. Before you ever see a single word of it, every sentence has been argued over and heavily negotiated by a massive bureaucracy. Adjectives are stripped out, verbs are fiercely debated. If a characterization actually survives to print, it means it has survived a brutal internal gauntlet.
And then you have the English Digest. This is a thin summary meant to be read by legislators, journalists, and foreign ministries who, let's be honest, are never going to read all 598 pages of the full volume. Space in this digest is literally the scarcest real estate the ministry controls. So when a subject wins a dedicated heading in this document, it's not just because a graphic designer needed to fill some empty space. It means someone inside the ministry successfully argued that this was the absolute most important trend of the year, and they won that argument. Section 2. Concern versus partnership. Let's look at the specific, highly intentional vocabulary change that sparked this entire explainer. Now, what's really fascinating here is how these two concepts sit side by side. In previous years, Japan's assessment treated the China-Russia relationship as a matter of serious concern, but the 2026 paper upgrades it to a deepening strategic partnership. I want you to hold those two ideas in your head for a second. A concern is something you monitor. It's a description of your feelings. A partnership, on the other hand, is something you actively plan against. It's a description of the structural world. Moving a relationship from the worrying column to the structural column is a deliberate, highly calculated act. It's the kind of phrase that will be quoted in budget hearings for the next decade. This newly promoted section spells out the evolution of this partnership across 4 distinct activities: joint naval exercises, long-range bomber patrols, coordinated naval operations, and participation in each other's exercises. And the document makes one absolutely clear claim about all of them. Japan is assessing a continuous, upward trend in their scale, their frequency, and their geographic scope. They are tracking a definitive trend line, not just a handful of isolated events. Section 3, the physical record. So we've looked at the paper. Now let's move the narrative into the physical world to examine the actual military maneuvers described over the summer of 2026. This brilliantly illustrates exactly what the white paper is reacting to. On June 27th, China and Russia flew a massive joint strategic air patrol. We're talking more than 15 aircraft here, including Chinese H-6 and Russian Tu-95 bombers, flying over the Sea of Japan, the East China Sea, and the Western Pacific. Then, a few days later, on July 6th, the Joint Sea Naval Exercise kicked off in the Yellow Sea. For the very first time since this exercise series started back in 2012, both Chinese and Russian submarines took part side by side. Finally, on July 19th, vessels from both nations conducted a live fire drill. Section 4, the legal realities. Before we go any further, we really need to pause and inject some strict legal precision here, because these kinds of events are routinely reported in ways that are just legally wrong. Let's look at that June 27th bomber patrol. It's documented that these aircraft entered an Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. This is a vast, unilaterally declared area that a state uses to identify approaching aircraft. But it is absolutely crucial to understand that an ADIZ is not sovereign territorial airspace. Territorial airspace ends just 12 nautical miles from the coast. Flying through an ADIZ is completely lawful. Scrambling fighter jets to go look at whoever is flying through it, that is also completely lawful. Both happen constantly.
We really want to keep sensationalism out of this explainer. The patrols entered an identification zone, which is fully permitted under international law.
The legal friction gets even more specific when we look at that July 19th live-fire drill, which took place roughly 180 kilometers from Okinotorishima. Japan protested this drill, stating it occurred inside its exclusive economic zone, its EEZ. Japan's position is that Okinotorishima is an island under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which grants it an EEZ. China entirely rejected the protest, stating that Okinotorishima is simply a rock, which, under that exact same UI convention, generates no EEZ whatsoever. We are impartially reporting the facts here. There is a fundamental, structural, legal disagreement over the status of this territory.
Section 5, Arithmetic of Two Fronts. Let's shift our focus now to the harsh realities of logistics and budgets. Because when the rhetoric changes in a white paper, the arithmetic of defense changes right along with it.
To put things in perspective, Japan is a long, thin archipelago stretching roughly 3,000 kilometers. Its northern approaches face Russia, while its southwestern chain faces the East China Sea. Handling two potential fronts simultaneously requires immense resources. Under Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, Japan actually hit its defense spending target of 2% of GDP, which is roughly 11 trillion yen, or about $70 billion in fiscal year 2025. That was 2 full years ahead of schedule, allowing them to afford new counterstrike capabilities like Tomahawk cruise missiles. But here's the brilliant arithmetic twist that you might not expect. While the defense budget surged and the language in the white paper hardened, the physical responses, the actual fighter scrambles, went down. In fiscal year 2024, Japan reported 704 scrambles. In fiscal year 2025, that number dropped to 595, which is the lowest total since 2012.
So physical activity went down, but the language went up. This isn't a mistake or a contradiction. It's the entire point. The ministry is signaling a profound shift. They are no longer just counting how often a plane flies by. By moving the wording from serious concern to deepening strategic partnership, the ministry is preparing its infrastructure, its budget, and its logistics for long-term, two-front reality. A change in words prepares the ground for a change in systemic posture.
Section 6, the global response. Because this white paper acts as a public instrument that is heavily read abroad, we have to look at the direct, unadorned responses from the capitals being discussed. We want to ensure you hear both sides plainly. Russia's defense ministry has officially stated that their joint patrols are conducted entirely in accordance with international law. They involve no violation of foreign airspace, they are part of an annual bilateral cooperation plan, and, importantly, they are not directed against third countries. That is Moscow's clear stated position on their military activities. China has also directly disputed the white paper's framing. Spokesperson Lin Jian from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Chen from the Ministry of National Defense both characterized the document as rehashing a false China threat narrative. They asserted that the white paper contains groundless accusations designed to serve as a pretext for Japan's own military expansion. So to distill everything we've covered in this explainer, we are looking at a situation where 3 distinct truths exist simultaneously without inherently contradicting each other. 1. The physical events, the bomber patrols, the submarine drills, factually occurred. 2. Japan assesses this trend as a deepening strategic partnership that requires structural planning and budgeting. 3. Beijing and Moscow maintain these actions are entirely lawful, routine, and aimed at no one. It is absolutely vital to remember that coordination is not the same as a formal mutual defense alliance. All 3 of these realities coexist. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to take away today. On August 4th, a filing decision was made inside a ministry. But filing decisions are how states commit themselves on the record. A paragraph in a digest is relatively cheap, but a two-front military posture, that's incredibly expensive. So watch next year's budget. Watch to see if the capability moves north as well as south. The words have been said out loud. Now we wait to see if the reality follows. So I'll leave you with this. When does a change of wording become a change of policy? Keep that in mind as you watch the Indo-Pacific this year. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what you read on the page.